Today, we're going to reboot our whole understanding of the word myth. Seriously, forget the idea that it just means a lie. We're going to explore how these ancient stories were actually the operating system for entire civilizations, a living code for their science, their laws, and even how they understood the human mind itself. Let's get into it. So let me ask you something. When you hear that word myth, what's the very first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, especially today, it really just boils down to one simple idea, right? You probably think of something that's just not true. A superstition, something science has debunked. But, for the ancient world, that couldn't have been further from the truth. To really get what they were doing, we have to completely reboot our definition. See, a myth isn't about being factually true or false. Think of it like a foundational story that acts as a society's operating system. It provides all the essential code for understanding the universe, for structuring society, and even for mapping the human mind. Its power is in what it does. So first up, myth as science. I mean, before there was physics or the scientific method, people still needed a way to make sense of the cosmos, right? Well, mythology was that first huge, comprehensive attempt to answer the biggest questions of all. Just look at how the way the world begins reveals two completely different worldviews. For the Greeks, over here on the left, the universe is basically a political drama. Power isn't just given, it's seized in a revolution against the old gods, the Titans. But for the Norse, on the right, it's all about brutal survival. The world is literally carved out of the body of a dead giant. A little pocket of order and a universe of endless hostile chaos. Two creation stories, two completely different operating systems for reality. Now, contrast both of those violent births with the story from Egypt. Their creation myth isn't a war. It's more like a biological process. The universe just sort of unfolds organically from a single source. And that perfectly mirrors the predictable, reliable, life-giving flood of their Nile River. You can just see how their stable geography shaped their myth, just like the constant squabbling between Greek city-states shaped theirs. Myths also explained all those recurring natural events. The Greeks didn't know about axial tilt to explain the seasons, so they had this. They took this impersonal natural cycle and turned it into a deeply human drama about a mother's grief and her joy. The world wasn't just a cold, uncaring place. Its fertility was directly tied to the emotions of a goddess. And the Egyptians used the exact same playbook for their most important myth. The death and the miraculous rebirth of the god Osiris, well, that was a perfect metaphor for their agricultural cycle. The death of the land in the dry season and its rebirth with the annual flood of the Nile. For them, the myth didn't just explain the cosmos, it actively powered it. Okay, so if myths are the software for explaining the universe, they are also absolutely the code for organizing society. This is where we see myth as a kind of divine social contract, an unwritten constitution that set up all the rules for power and behavior. I mean, how do you justify why a king gets to be a king? The Greeks had a revolutionary answer. Zeus's right to rule is earned because he beat the old corrupt regime of the Titans. It's a story that actually justifies overthrowing a bad system. The Egyptian model, though, totally different. It's deeply conservative. The pharaoh's power is innate, handed down in an unbroken chain from the gods. So to challenge the pharaoh wasn't just politics, it was trying to unravel the very fabric of the universe. Myths also hard-coded really important social laws. Take Xenia, the sacred duty of hospitality. You have to remember, in a world without hotels or police, this was a critical piece of social technology. It created a web of trust that made travel and trade and diplomacy even possible, all of it backed by the very real threat of ticking off Zeus himself, who, by the way, might just show up at your door in disguise. And on the flip side of that, you have hubris, the ultimate cosmic crime. This was the sin of a mortal getting, let's be honest, too big for their britches, of thinking you were as good as the gods. It was a super powerful tool for social control, a warning against the kind of ambition that could tear the whole system down. And these weren't just abstract ideas either. They were hammered home through these unforgettable stories that basically functioned like divine legal cases. The entire Trojan War kicks off because someone violates Xenia. Icarus is the absolute poster child for the dangers of hubris. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were teaching everyone the rules. Play nice with others and know your place. So we've talked about myth as science and myth as law. But now we get to what might be the most profound function of all. Myth as a map of our own inner world. See, the gods, the monsters, the heroes. They aren't just characters out there somewhere. They're powerful external projections of our own minds. And for this, we can thank the brilliant psychologist Carl Jung. He came up with this idea of a collective unconscious, basically a deep, inherited layer of the mind that all human beings share. It's like the psychic bedrock of our species. And this shared psychic space, well, it's populated by what he called archetypes. These are the universal patterns, the wise old man, the great mother, the trickster, that just show up again and again in myths and dreams across every culture throughout all of history. This is probably why so many mythologies from cultures that never even met have such strangely similar stories. They're all drawing from the same deep well. And you can see these archetypes in action right here. Just look at the Sky Father, Zeus, Odin, Ra, all different flavors, but they all represent that same core pattern of authority and order. Or look at the trickster. Loki is an agent of pure chaos, while Hermes is maybe more of a creative disruptor, but they're both born from the same psychic blueprint. You start to realize these aren't just characters. They're externalized versions of the fundamental forces that are inside every one of us. The ancient pantheons weren't just a list of gods. They were a diagram of the human soul. So what does this all mean for us today? We have science, we have real laws, we have psychology. Why should any of this ancient code still matter? Well, because even though our rational modern world might have abandoned the literal belief in these gods, the operating system is still running in the background. And this is the key takeaway. The myths never really left. The archetypes are alive and well in our movies, in our political leaders, and in our own personal lives. That heroic quest, the battle against a villain, the sacrifice that leads to a rebirth, these ancient patterns are the deep grammar of our modern stories. Which of course brings us to the final and maybe the most important question. These ancient narratives, they provide a blueprint for how to live a life. They tell us who the hero is, what the monster looks like, and what's worth fighting for. So take a second and look at your own life, at your own beliefs. What myths are you living by?